Great to have you in. Merry Christmas, everybody, as we welcome in Mr. Chuck Cooperstein. Chuck, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. How the heck are you, man?
It's all good. Couldn't be a whole lot better in Mavs land right now.
Yeah, things are coming together nicely, very nicely. Last night was super impressive. I mean, they just tear up these Trailblazers. That's what they do. But everything's clicking right now. The health of Luka, no question about whether he plays tomorrow, right?
No, I mean he's back, and I haven't seen the injury report for today, but it's not like he was taxed or anything like that last night. And he played 30 minutes, which is again well below his average, and that's all well and good. It's part of the real strength of this team that there is incredible depth. For years. It's always been talked about, well, we've got depth, we can do this and we can do that, and then you get toward the end of the season, you try to pare down your rotation to 8.5 and maybe 9, and you know who those players are. Well, here you don't know who those players are, and it really could come down to who they're playing at a particular time, the players that are in the rotation, and it's a wonderful problem for Jason Kidd to have.
Chuck, is there a thought, and you were talking about the depth, does Jason Kidd play with the lineup in a way of when guys are available and guys are not available that maybe that we might see with Kyrie and Luka both being out of a game at the same time and seeing how those rotations and stuff work? I mean, would he take the season to do things like that?
Well, we saw that the other night.
Yeah,
that didn't go very well.
No.
And so I can't imagine them doing that on purpose.
Okay.
Unless you get to game 81 and 82 and everything's already decided.
Sure.
And that's what happened last year, against Detroit and Oklahoma City at the end of the year. And it didn't matter, and so they sat those guys out. But if there's anything to play for, I can't imagine, unless they're both injured,
right,
that they won't play. And so you're going to have at least one of those guys.
Yeah, it just seems like to me that this coaching staff is such attention to detail in the way that they operate and stuff like that. And they're like no stone unturned type of a group. So I just didn't know if that they're like, listen, tonight let's think about this, or let's think about with the way the schedule plays out for you sometimes.
Well, I think, again, you look at a team like the Clippers, whose record isn't particularly good, but they did go into Memphis and win last night.
Yeah, they did.
They did beat the Mavericks in one of the two games in Dallas. I mean, they're the type of team. They're probably going to make the playoffs. They're athletic and long, and they've got some bulk in the middle. It's hard to score against them. It really is. And the Mavericks didn't score easily against them in either one of those games, even with Luka, coming back, or right. Luka, Kyrie was back, Luka was out for both of those games. But when they didn't play, that was a disaster waiting to happen. I mean, it's one thing to have depth, and depth is a wonderful thing, especially in the regular season.
Right.
But it's not like you're just wanting to play with food just to play with food. Right. Okay, that's not a good thing, especially when you do know that as things are as tight as they are, and you see where the Mavericks are in relation to Houston and Memphis in the standings right now.
Right.
I mean, you've got to make sure at the very least you have a top 4 seed, and preferably you'd like to be in the top 2 or 3 so you can avoid the top seed, likely to be Oklahoma City, for as long as you possibly can.
Chuck, real quick, Chuck, are you more surprised of Houston forever, it seems like, always had young talent, but not the coach to go along with it. I mean, no disrespect to the coaches that have been there before, but now they have that. Are you more surprised by where they are or where Minnesota is?
That's a good question, Brian.
Because Minnesota's
I would
10th.
say, in fairness to Stephen Silas, who was there before Ime Udoka,
yeah.
He was given a bunch of AAU players.
Sure.
He was not given Fred VanVleet
right.
and Dylan Brooks to bring a sense of professionalism to them, and Steven Adams too, for that matter. So that's. I really hate, because Stephen Silas is my neighbor, quite frankly,
right.
here, and I'm good friends with him, and he's a hell of a coach. He really is, but he was not given the means by which to succeed. Having said that, Ime Udoka is a hell of a coach, and he has Dylan Brooks and Fred VanVleet to execute his mindset that then translates to other guys. And, like guys like Tari Eason and Amen Thompson, I mean, guys you don't even talk about, right? But they're unbelievable. Okay, they're unbelievably athletic, and they're a pain in the butt to play, as we saw when the Mavericks played them very early in the season. Mm-hmm. And I'm really looking forward to next week on New Year's night, when most of the world's going to be watching football and watching the Sugar Bowl between Notre Dame and Georgia. I'm going to be in Houston watching the Mavericks play the Rockets, and it's going to be a hell of a game. It really is. But Minnesota, they made a big trade, and sometimes it works, like it did with the Mavericks last year, okay? Sometimes it doesn't work, like with the Mavericks when they got Kyrie. It didn't work right away, not necessarily because he and Luka didn't work, but it just the team just never quite got together. And it seems like Minnesota, their defense is still really good. Like their last 10 games, they're the best defensive team in the NBA right now, and they were the best defensive team last year, but they can't score. Their offense is just all messed up. I mean, they're working on a streak now of, I want to say it's something like 10 straight games where they have not even scored 110 points. And in the NBA today, that's almost impossible to do. So there are some real issues there that they've got to get figured out. It's not easy for them because, frankly, Randall plays differently than Towns, and that changes the spacing on the floor. And Mike Conley, as much as I have loved him through the years, he's gotten old, and they don't have a legitimate backup point guard. They don't have anybody who can go get them a bucket, other than Anthony Edwards, who is now having to do all kinds of things and doing different things. He's shooting a bunch of threes, not driving the ball anymore. They're kind of messed up. I mean, they've lost 3 games in a row here, got beat by Atlanta last night, and the games before that against New York and Golden State, they've been smacked in all 3 of those games. They're all over the place right now. Houston is definitely not.
No, Houston's pretty legit right now, for sure. It's Chuck Cooperstein, radio voice of the Mavericks, with us here on The Fan. Where would you like to see the Mavs start to improve here, other than just remaining healthy, building that continuity? What areas of the team need to be improved as you start looking ahead towards the rest of the season?
Well, I mean, I think the backup 4 probably needs some looking at. Now, whether that is already on the roster with Kleba and Prosper, or whether they feel the need toward the deadline to try to find another person, who can fill that backup role better behind PJ Washington. That's something I think that can be looked at. I think, just from an overall standpoint, they've been a little loose with the basketball over the last month, a little bit better the last couple of games, but they really just need to sort of buckle down. They've been looking for a lot of those home run passes to try to beat the defense down the floor, so you're not playing against a set defense, and sometimes discretion is the better part of valor. And rebounding is always going to be an issue. And they've been playing a bunch of teams here lately that are really good offensive rebounding teams, and they've been hurt a bit because of that. And that's just something that I think when you have Luka back at full strength, that really solves a lot of the problems because he is such a good rebounder from the perimeter. So. I think that can definitely help too. So there isn't really a lot I think that they've got to worry about, given not only their record, but how they played, where they pretty well dominated people.
Is Kyrie even better than he was last year?
I'm sorry?
Is Kyrie even better than he was last year?
Kyrie's been sensational. And I tell you that where you don't maybe appreciate Kyrie so much, and you saw it against James Harden the other night, and you saw it last night when Jeremy Grant was trying to post him up and try to play bully ball with him down the block. When Kyrie wants to guard, and he's really he's being challenged by people. I mean, he's going to get his chest into you, and he's going to make it hard. And that he's doing it in game 28 of the season, as opposed to just waiting until the playoffs to start doing it, is a great sign. And obviously Luka's defense has been so much better this year, and not that it was ever really as bad as people wanted to make it out to be, and especially with what happened in the finals. But he's much better on that end this year, and I do think that if your best player is going to try and play the way they're playing, then that's going to pretty much trickle down to everybody else on the roster, and they're going to try and do the same thing.
Chuck, when I was working with Bill Parcells, and the one thing he always was talking to us about was, your team by Thanksgiving. You understand where's the NBA point of your basketball team? Is there a date for that? Is there basketball folks say, hey, you'll know your team at this time?
Well, most teams will say basically from 25 to 30 games, but there's always the caveat of the trade deadline.
Right.
And what do you do with the trade deadline? Football, it doesn't really work that way. I mean, it's better now in football than it was as far as acquiring difference-making players. But even at that level, there are so many other players in football right. that have to play in order for the team to win. That unless you were getting, a franchise quarterback, I don't know what material difference, making a trade week 10 of the season is going to make. In the NBA, generally speaking, even at the trade deadline and afterward, there are very few trades that ultimately become difference makers. You may improve on the margins, but there's nothing that really or rarely that materially changes your team. Last year was obviously the exception with the Mavericks because
right.
their two trades clearly changed everything. But I would say, generally speaking, 30 games into the season, you pretty well know who you are. So that's basically about 38% of the season.
Chuck Cooperstein with us here on The Fan. Chuck, obviously a lot of conversation just generally around the NBA right now with the ratings down and people are trying to change the game, too much three-point shooting. Well, what are your thoughts on all that?
Well, I mean, I don't mind three-point shooting at all, as long as the guys taking three-pointers are the ones who are capable of making it. There's a lot of times when, teams will come down and be 3-on-1, and in the past, the ball handler was getting it to the foul line, the guys are running the wing, and they're going to the basket, and you're throwing a pass, and they're shooting a layup. Well, now they're flaring out to shoot a three, and I'm not sure that's always the best play. But having said that, I mean, the players are significantly more skilled than they've ever been. They really are. I mean, despite what the naysayers would say. But, I mean, I look at a team like the Mavericks and, you compare them to last year. They take fewer threes than they've ever taken. And their threes are better, quite frankly, because they're doing so much damage in the paint and at the rim that there's so much space now for them to shoot. And they got a whole bunch of shooters on their team who can make three-pointers and make them at a better than NBA average clip that, you should wind up taking them. So you should wind up taking about, 35 threes a game. That does seem to be, the right number for this particular team to take. There was a great article that was out this morning that kind of just tried to, and I posted it on Twitter, kind of explaining, how while, the results may be, where they are, that there are so many different ways that teams use to get to that particular point that, those who say, well, the game, everybody's doing the same thing all the time, it's just jacking up threes. There's a lot of intricacy in how that works. I think the players are great. And I do think that the game is great. I think the officiating could be better. I mean, clearly, I think it could be better. I pretty much believe we could probably say that in all sports.
Yes.
But I do think the NBA has an issue that they really do need to deal with and don't put their head in the sand. I'm not sure they're doing the best job they could in that area. The issue of load management is something that is never going to go away, I think, and it does turn people off, and they should be turned off by it. I mean, you can talk about how the game is so spread out and it's more difficult to defend than it ever was before. Well, then you just got to prepare for it. And maybe I'm too simplistic in that way, but to me, you owe it to the fan base that's paying a really good price for their ticket, let alone whoever is going to watch the game on TV, that if you can play, you should play. And then, you do have the TV issue, and the TV issue is a major one because it's almost as if the NBA has made it harder for fans to watch their teams. With blackouts on League Pass and, the new contract coming up that's going to send a whole bunch of stuff to streaming. I don't know if this is the best long-term strategy for the NBA, but they obviously believe that it is. And I guess starting next year, we're about to find out.